never wrote another story like that again. I also imagine radio that's interactive. What would it be like to have a radio documentary that you could have a conversation with? What are some uses for this? We could have call-outs for stories instead of leaving a voicemail that could be on an assistive device or on a smart speaker. We could create sort of like video games to explain complex financial systems to people. We could create quizzes that told people exactly how a proposed policy change would affect them in their lives. This is another example that I mocked up. This is my dear friend and colleague, Lewis Wallace. Lewis is a reporter who covers LGBTQ issues, and he's told me that when he tells a story for his community, he tells it very differently than when he tells it for a general audience. When he's telling it for his community, he feels like he is quite free, and when he's telling it to a general audience, he has to stop and start and explain a lot of things that he really doesn't want to spend time explaining. So we mocked up this example of what it would be like if, while Lewis was telling me a story, I could interrupt him and ask him a question the same way that I interrupt him when we're having a conversation in real life.
It's difficult to get an accurate count of transgender people or violence against transgender people. There's no regular national survey or census question about gender identity. But according to a few recent studies, transgender women of color face a high risk of murder compared with cisgender women.
Lewis, what does cisgender mean?
I'm glad you asked. So transgender is a broad term for people whose gender identity is different from how they were assigned at birth. Cisgender refers to people whose gender identity corresponds to what they were assigned at birth. Cis means on this side, while trans means across. The term cisgender was added to the Oxford English Dictionary in 2015. Now back to the story. But according to a few recent studies, transgender women of color face a high risk of murder compared with cisgender women. The combined effects of discrimination and violence can actually mean a lower life expectancy.
What would it be like to fall into an audio rabbit hole the same way you do on Wikipedia? I think that would be really exciting. But I don't want it to sound like I'm reinventing the wheel. Interactive radio isn't new. Think about how common call-in shows are. They're everywhere. In fact, in my research, I found that the first call-in show in North America premiered in 1935. It was called America's Town Meeting of the Air. So I'm going to play you a little clip of it, of course, because we're all radio nerds here, and pay special attention to the topic that was being discussed. I think you'll find it familiar.